Sunday morning cold, eyes on the score, touchdown dance ball, craving for more. Friends are calling, trades are on fire. Rookies falling, championship desire. Fantasy football fever, chasing the dream. Top of the leaderboard, we're the winning team.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Healers program, a show that is Dynasty Fantasy Football. You can find me at FF Healers on Twitter X, and don't forget to look us up at YouTube by just simply searching FF Healers for shorts, podcast videos, and fantasy league related videos. I quickly wanted to just review, remember I had a quick early season bet well before the NFL draft that Luther Burden was going to outpace Tyrone McMillan in fantasy points. And we saw Burden come to life here in week 3 against the Cowboys. He ends up scoring 22 points, 101 yards, 3 receptions, and a touchdown. Meanwhile, Tyrone McMillan, he is getting peppered between 6 and 8 targets each week. Hearing a lot of fantasy podcast people really hype Tyrone McMillan up because of the opportunity that he has. Unfortunately, the Panthers offense, I don't know if that's still an offense that you're trying to go for. I really don't see the appeal, especially with Bryce Young under center. But Tyrone McMillan, he has 35.5 points through 3 weeks, while Luther Burden has 22 points. There's still a lot of season to go, and we'll continue to update you on those two players. And speaking of updates, let's also not forget that I had suggested that Darius Slayton is going to outscore Travis Hunter in fantasy points this year in 2025. And let's just take a look here. 3 weeks in, Travis Hunter, 17.6 fantasy points compared to Darius Slayton has 15.1 points. And what we're going to find out now is Danger-RUSS, Mr. Russell Wilson, he's going to be getting benched now for Jaxson Dart. So now Darius Slayton finds himself with a quarterback upgrade. And so what looks to be a really even amount of points over the last 3 weeks between Darius Slayton and Travis Hunter, could we see Darius Slayton push forward more quickly now that Jaxson Dart is going to be under center for the Giants? Danger-RUSS, he was throwing some ugly moon balls up, just looked awful just this past weekend. He looked like he was putting a lot of desperation into those balls against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was putting players in harm's way. That's why I keep calling him Danger-RUSS. Neighbors looked like he had a blow to the head. He was going to get out for the game, and somehow he made it back into the game before the game was actually the time was up. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, he also had a really close call on the sidelines that looked really, really scary. And at the end of the game, you couldn't help but, feel a little sad for Russell Wilson because he looked like he knew his time was up with the Giants. They had said before the game that if the Giants lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, that Jaxson Dart would be the quarterback going forward. And that's certainly what has come out this week. I just saw some fake news that Russell Wilson was going to retire midseason, and obviously that's fake. He's supposedly going to be sticking around with the Giants and helping Jaxson Dart with reading defenses and things like that. And Jameis Winston, he is still present there. It's only a matter of time in the next couple weeks that we could see either Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston get traded from the Giants just to accumulate more draft picks. And they're both under very cheap contracts, so they're going to be two easy assets to move on as far as the Giants are concerned. Giants right now, they're 0-3. The chances of going into the playoffs at this point is pretty weak. Now it's just a matter of time just to see what Jaxson Dart has, and there's been a lot of hype in the offseason. There's been a lot of hype going into the preseason, and now going into the regular season for Jaxson Dart. And he sure is bringing a lot of swag and momentum. And so the Giants fans, they have a lot to look forward to with Jaxson Dart. A first-round pick, end of the first-round pick. They traded into the first round this year just to pick up Jaxson Dart, and it sounds like the Giants are really happy with him, and he has ascended. He ascended past Winston very early in the preseason, and now he finds himself as a quarterback one for the Giants going forward. Speaking of Burden, again, he just had that explosive game. We're seeing the Bears finally have a game where Caleb Williams was not sacked against a very speculative at best defense for the Cowboys. And then on the other side, we saw in the Cowboys devastation. Ceedee Lamb gets injured. He attempted to get back in there. He had a shoe off for much of the game. He tried having it taped. He tried getting back in there, just pushing off a little bit. He wasn't able to, and so he quickly got out of the game and was considered out. It looked like his ankle had everted or turned outwards, so it put stress on the deltoid ligament on the inside part of his ankle. And there was thoughts that maybe he had a high ankle sprain, but I mean, there could be high ankle sprain. It could be deltoid ligament. It could be multi-ligament damage for Ceedee Lamb's ankle. It sounds like he's going to be out somewhere between like 4 to 6 weeks. And I had seen that the devastation with Ceedee Lamb for this Cowboys offense is about as bad as seeing Micah Parsons being off of the defense. And so it's just tough to watch. It was tough to view. And if you had Ceedee Lamb, he gave you a big zero burger and potentially put your team at significantly harm's risk of losing your fantasy matchup there in week 3. The Cowboys' leading target then was Jake Ferguson. And so Jake Ferguson, just a mediocre tight end, is going to be getting peppered a lot more. And then George Pickens is the other option. Javonte Williams, I think he's going to take a little bit of a step backwards because now without Ceedee Lamb, they're going to have less red zone opportunities. And so although he's getting plenty of touches, he's going to have less opportunities to score touchdowns as he did in weeks 1 and 2, where he found himself on the goal line. And guess what? It was Javonte Williams' number that was called. The Minnesota Vikings. Wow. Complete domination against the Bengals. If you had the Vikings defense, you had 30-some points on defense because of fumble recoveries, touchdowns, and let's not forget about all the sacks that they had against Jake Browning. Minnesota Vikings and Jordan Mason looked fantastic. Jordan Mason was the lead running back easily. And then we also had a guy in Xavier Scott, who is now the number 3, now number 2 because Aaron Jones is injured, who has shown some burst as well. And the Minnesota Vikings were able to move the ball. Hey, who would have thunk it when we actually are able to pass the ball with an experienced quarterback in Carson Wentz? And I can't say it enough that I think Carson Wentz, he has just had a lot of the speckle and the spark has been completely rubbed off on him since he was with the Colts and he wasn't able to get them to the playoffs when they were a quarterback away. And everyone forgets he was playing under multiple ankle injuries that year, and he wasn't playing to the output that he could because of injuries. And then he just got tossed around the league and had some injuries here and there and was trying to play through the injuries. And the only person that ended up hurting was himself. And so he barely gets signed before the NFL season starts with the Minnesota Vikings. And now he finds himself as a starter in week 3 and completely blows away a once very opportunistic offense in the Bengals. And the defense for the Bengals is terrible. They're terrible, and the offense didn't look very good at all. And so Browning is going to have a really rough time going forward. And the only person that you're going to be able to trust is really Jamar Chase. The Colts. Jonathan Taylor. And let's not forget about Indiana Jones. The Colts continue to hum. They are now one of the few teams that are 3-0. How about that, Colton Palmer? The Seahawks blew out the Saints completely. JSN, he was scoring early and often. There was positive game script, and there was a limited, output that was required to even beat the Saints. And now we saw the Seahawks. They were playing the Cardinals just yesterday, and JSN really wasn't targeted all that much because they were able to run against the Cardinals defense. and they were running pretty well. Even Charbonnet, I was very surprised that Charbonnet was the guy who ended up getting the touchdown, and he was running quite a lot. And then it wasn't until later on in the second half that you started to see Walker. And so keep an eye on that. I thought Charbonnet was injured, and it was really interesting to see that Charbonnet was actually playing the goal line carries against the Cardinals instead of Walker. When I was watching it, I was a little bit confused in that. And it appeared that Cooper Kupp was being targeted quite a bit by Sam Darnold. But then when I looked at the points, I'm like, he may have had the targets, but he didn't really have that much yardage as a whole. It was a lot of close passes. And so it still looks like Cooper Kupp maybe cooked as a whole. But don't worry about JSN. He looked pretty frustrated out there, and there was a holding call that ended up calling back what was a second touchdown for Charbonnet, which kept the Cardinals back in the game. But then JSN, he ended up having a couple clutch plays towards the end of the game, and he was fine as far as his fantasy output. He seems to be one of the consistent pieces that are there with the Seahawks. What's inconsistent is the Walker-Charbonnet tandem going back and forth. Charbonnet looked really good, week 1. I think Walker was out at that point, and then you had Walker in week 2, week 3, having about 18 points a game. And then here week 4, then it just seemed like it reverted back to Charbonnet. And I didn't play Charbonnet in my Guillotine League because I was concerned about his injuries. And I don't know how you could be confident in that when he just didn't play and he didn't do a whole lot in regards to some of the practices. So the Seahawks are somewhat a team to kind of watch in regards to the backfield. And another backfield to watch is the Saints. They have thrown the least amount percentage-wise to Kamara in his entire career. It's only like a 5% target rate. Most of Kamara's career, he's getting a lot of touches in between the tackles, but then you kind of wonder, why isn't Kendre Miller kind of stepping into that role, kind of getting those empty calorie runs? So if you have Kamara, you're concerned. There is a bailout opportunity. The Saints are so bad. I'm still waiting for Kamara to get traded. He's definitely one of those candidates that are looking for trades. We already talked about Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Kamara, Travis Etienne, maybe another guy with the Jaguars that could be traded because they seem to be so high on Tootin, and then also LaQuint Allen. But if the Jaguars end up moving off of another running back, then that starts to build a hole for them, because I don't think they have a running back 4 now that they have already moved Tank Bigsby to Philadelphia. The Atlanta Falcons completely shit the bed against the Panthers this past week. They lost 30-0. That's right, 30 points to 0 against the Panthers. And after the game, when asked, it sounded like maybe there was some technical difficulties with the audio equipment, and now the offensive coordinator is going to be on the ground instead of in the press box, and that's going to make the Atlanta Falcons that much more efficient. I'm a bit concerned here for the Falcons and their offense. Bijan Robinson, he still looked okay. I mean, he bailed you out with the receptions. Michael Penix, he ended up getting benched for Kirk Cousins towards the end of the game. I don't think Kirk Cousins did much more because, I mean, again, it was 30-0. I'm not sure what the opportunity share was there for Kirk Cousins as a whole, but I really don't see this as a quarterback controversy, but they're on shaky grounds with the Falcons. And again, making a player like Kyle Pitts more shaky on your roster. He was consistently giving you somewhere between 7 and 9 points, and just kind of like scooting by. And then Drake London, everyone keeps forgetting, but just a couple weeks back he had an injury and he's playing through the injury, and I think that's what's really slowed his role on the offense. And then with the addition to Darnell Mooney, I think they're just trying to figure out where all these puzzle pieces fit. Speaking of puzzle pieces, the Washington Commanders, as you recall, in week 2, they had lost Austin Eckler in the backfield. And then it was speculation of, well, who is going to carry the load? Is it going to be McNichols? Is it going to be Rodriguez? Is it going to be Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt? And we saw in week 3 that in McNichols, I had said, I think it's going to be a McNichols game. And he had this really amazing run where he broke many tackles and ended up scooting about 60 yards to get a touchdown. And so he had like a 60-yard run and a touchdown, which was awesome to see. So McNichols scores you like 11, 12 points. And then you had Chris Rodriguez, who had the most snap share. He had like 11 touches in the backfield for like 40 yards, and people are saying you need to go out and get Chris Rodriguez. I'm not so sure if I want to have a plotter like Chris Rodriguez on my bench. You just don't know when you'd want to play him, for one. I suspect Rodriguez might be a player, because he's a plotter, that you play him during the home games. And when you're away, then you play the Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritts and maybe the McNichols. But this running back core is going to be a tricky one to decipher week in and week out. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, he is he's second most efficient running back in the league right now in the touches that he has. He's only having somewhere around like 25 and 30% snap share. So his snap share is still very low, but with the opportunity that he has, he's doing a lot with it, and he's making a lot of people miss. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is going to continue to ascend. We can't forget that Ja'Cory was a day 3 pick. I think he was the last running back picked in the 7th round. And he only played one game in college last year because of eligibility problems in the college. That was a big debacle. And that's what barely got him drafted to begin with, is because he only had one game opportunity for college that people could look at. And then he completely blew up the Shrine Bowl. And that's where he got back on to at least my radar and probably the NFL's. And Washington got a steal with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. It was nice to see that Hawkinson was back with the Minnesota Vikings also. He did score a touchdown and he had a few receptions. So very, very cool to see. People were very concerned about him. Speaking of concerns, Najee Harris, he had a non-contact injury. He ruptured his Achilles. Amarian Hampton is now the lead running back for the Chargers going forward. And now it's a matter of time of like, okay, is it worth picking up Haskins? Is it worth picking up, who also was a running back for Michigan when Harbaugh was there? So they do have the shower narrative there with Harbaugh. Kamani Vidal, he was a player that Colton definitely was not on, but he was a player that there was a lot of hype going into the season last year, and he did absolutely nothing. So I think if either one of them are on your waiver wires, especially in Dynasty, they're not a bad pickup just to kind of see what happens. Because Amarian Hampton, he has not been that efficient with his touches as a whole. And the Chargers, they have a really good offensive line, but they were still kind of figuring out like how the blocking schemes are. So we'll see if Amarian Hampton can actually explode going forward. If you have Hampton, you're really excited for the opportunity. We're sad to see Najee Harris as a whole get injured the way he did. You never like to see the ruptured Achilles. We talked about it just last week when Colton was on, that the Achilles ruptures, that's pretty much it for you with the running backs, especially now that Najee Harris is getting a little bit older. He's like 27, going to be 28. And the only player that's really kind of bounced back well has been J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins now with the Broncos as their lead running back. We did see Foreman come back and play a little bit, but overall, it's Amarian Hampton wheels up. Another injury at the running backs. Last year was one of the lowest number of running back injuries in the NFL history. And this year, it seems like we're having running back after running back after running back after running back getting injured. James Conner also sustained a season-ending injury. He was carted off, looked brutal. Now Trey Benson is the lead running back, who of which looked pathetic against the Seahawks defensive front. But the Seahawks do have a good defense, so there will be better days for Trey Benson. The good news is there really wasn't anybody else in the backfield with Trey Benson that was getting most of the touches. DeMarcado, he had, I think, one play that I can recall in the fourth quarter, but it was mostly Trey Benson in the backfield. I was kind of wondering if Michael Carter was going to be brought up and put into the system a little bit more. A throwback name in Michael Carter, who was a previous 4th-round pick with the Jets. And then we also had seen Zonovan Knight, or Bam Knight. He's also on this team, and actually he was ahead of Michael Carter. And what's interesting is Bam, he had a few good games, and he was also with the Jets being drafted fairly late. And again, they could move off on him because they ended up hitting on guys like Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen also. And so Zonovan Knight, he was a guy he was on kind of my radar to just kind of see what happens. And now I can simply just drop him just after seeing the Cardinals play. Pathetic, mind you, against the Seahawks. And this team just looks like it's spiraling. The Cardinals offense looked like it was in shambles. Murray was not connecting very well with Marvin Harrison Jr. Harrison Jr., towards the end of the game, he scores a touchdown. He makes a big catch over a defender, catches the ball, goes to his knees, and looks like he was about ready to cry because he was just like that excited and was just that emotional after catching a touchdown pass from Kyler Murray. He probably thought that there wasn't ever going to be a touchdown coming his way because how awful the play has been for the Arizona Cardinals. More injuries at the running backs. Tyrone Tracy was also injured. He dislocated his shoulder. We saw this happen with Xavier with the Kansas City Chiefs. And now we're seeing it with Tyrone Tracy. They're probably going to have to put a sling of some kind on his shoulder, see if he can help stabilize the shoulder for a time so that way they don't keep continuing to irritate the labrum. He'll probably be a guy that gets an off-season surgery just like Xavier does, Xavier Worthy. And now we find ourselves with Tyrone Tracy being just kind of put up on the shelf. Devin Singletary, he's pretty much washed. So you know what time it is with the Giants. It's Jaxson Dart and it's Cam Skattebo. Cam Skattebo looked amazing. He was getting catches out of the backfield. He looked like he was pretty much like the whole offense for the Giants when they ended up getting beat by the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Kansas City Chiefs have a really tough defensive front. So it was still really good to see Skattebo involved as much as he is. And he's looking like he may be more valuable at this time than maybe one of the guys that everyone was really high on, and Ashton Jeanty. Because at least Ashton Jeanty, he's had the whole offense to himself, and he really hasn't produced a whole lot from coming from a small college. And now we're seeing Cam Skattebo get all the opportunities here with the Giants going forward, getting receptions unlike Ashton Jeanty. So how is Ashton Jeanty rated higher in fantasy football for this season? I don't see it. So Cam Skattebo wheels up with the Giants. Tight end news. Jatavian Sanders, he has a high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for multiple weeks. He will be out this week. And that means that Tommy Tremble is going to be the lead tight end for the Panthers. Again, the Panthers offense is not an offense that I'm trying to hitch my wagon to. But with Sanders being out, and he was out most of the game last week, and Tyrone McMillan still didn't really produce all that much, it's only going to give Tet more opportunities with Sanders being out. So if you have Tyrone McMillan, like, he's going to get the targets, but they don't have the efficiency. They don't have other players that can take the targets away or spread the ball around. And so now that they have no one else that they're throwing to, they got Hunter Renfrow. You know, what is Hunter Renfrow? They can double up Tyrone McMillan, and now all I got to do is stop Hubbard. Seems like an easy formula, but apparently the Atlanta Falcons couldn't figure it out. Terry McLaurin, he's unlikely to play. He had some really awful news that came out and said that the message came out and said he doesn't look like he needs surgery. I didn't realize that he needed surgery to begin with. I knew he had a hip problem, but like, what's going on? Sounds like maybe it's more of like a sports hernia, and he could be out somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks. It's really interesting that Colton had brought up, like, what's your concern with Terry McLaurin? And it's like, well, last week we said there's a lot of concerns, especially, and I just simply talked about he had a high touchdown rate last year, and that doesn't really correlate, year in and year out. Not to mention now they have Deebo Samuel on the roster, who he's been kind of hit and miss, but now it just gives Deebo Samuel more of an opportunity. The quarterback play, it's been fine, but Daniels is injured. He's not playing this week. And so now they're stuck with Mariota again under center. They are a team that's 3-0, but like, what do you do? They're going to be, let me check here. Washington Commanders, they're actually 2-1, not 3-0. And but the Giants are 0-3. The Cowboys are 1-2. The Cowboys aren't going anywhere. Their offense and defense is completely destroyed. The Giants actually may take over and beat out the Cowboys now that they're switching their players up. And the Commanders, they're still playing pretty well, even with Mariota under center. But the shark in the water is actually the Eagles. They're 3-0. And I really don't see the Eagles slowing down. They still look like they're humming, even though Saquon didn't really put up a lot of points this week. It was actually A.J. Brown actually came back. They actually threw the ball this past week. And hopefully we'll see that offense, open it up a little bit more so that way they're not just all run heavy, that they have some passing plays. Another player that's just got injured is Mike Evans. And we've seen this year in and year out, multiple years in a row. Hamstring injury. Sounds like it's not as bad as last year, which he was out for, I think, 3 games. But Mike Evans, he's probably going to be out this week. I suspect he's probably going to be out next week. And I'm not sure when their bye week is. But that is really concerning for the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are now going to be starting Egbuka. And it sounds like Godwin's going to be back. I picked up Shepard just in case. And then another guy to kind of keep your eye on is Tez Johnson. Tez Johnson. I think he was in the 5th round pick from the Buccaneers this year. Or he went undrafted. It was one of the two. I can't think of, I don't remember on top of my head. But Tez Johnson, he was once a loved player prior to the combine. And then his draft capital just kind of like brought him way back down. He was a guy that went undrafted in a lot of my dynasty rookie drafts. But Tez Johnson, he can play. Very small player. This could be an opportunity for him. And I really don't see Chris Godwin coming back full force, even though if he is back, he's probably in the 2 wide receiver sets. But if he's not, then Shepard is the next guy up. He's the guy that has experience. He's a guy that played with Baker Mayfield multiple years now, and he's been fairly reliable for him, although he is aging and he can often be injured as well. Titans head coach Brian Callahan is now giving up the offensive play calling duties to the quarterback coach, Bo Hardigree. Titans are 0-3, and now the head coach, Brian Callahan, is saying, maybe I'm done calling plays on the offense, which may help Cam Ward, because I keep hearing that Cam Ward, he's playing decent. And I feel like people are just kind of like spattering out the same thing over and over again. But let's just kind of dive into Cam Ward and see like how many points is Cam Ward really giving fantasy managers at this time. So let's dive in. Cam Ward, he gets the unlucky draw off playing the Denver Broncos in week 1. He scores you 2.48 points. Cam Ward, also unlucky draw playing the LA Rams week 2. Scores you 9.8 points. The Indianapolis Colts, who aren't supposed to have a very good defense, he plays them week 3. He is now scoring you 11.96 points. Good for quarterback 21 of the week. What's great news here is with those 3 teams, he only has 1 interception that he's had, and it was actually to the Colts. It wasn't to the Rams. It wasn't to the Denver Broncos. He is not really giving you much rushing upside at all. He's had 3 rushing attempts in week 3, and he had 4 rushing attempts in week 2, and he gave you either 8 yards or 12 yards on those runs. And so this is a guy that's just going to be kind of a game manager. He's spreading the ball around. The one guy that is looking good for the Titans is Alec Aomanor, and he is not waiting to score some fantasy points and waiting for Travis Hunter to defend him. No. He is providing some fantasy points now. And Alec Ayomanor, he is a very talented wide receiver, and he was drafted later than I was expecting in the NFL draft. I believe he was drafted in the 4th round in the NFL draft. He is currently sitting at wide receiver 37. And Cam Ward, I should have said he's quarterback 33 for the season. That's right, 33. There is only 32 teams in the NFL, and he's rated as 33. And so if you're saying that you're not concerned about Cam Ward, I think you're telling yourself a lie. I think Cam Ward needs some more weapons to really see, like, what can he do? And maybe it was as simple as just switching from the head coach down to the quarterback coach, which I think is interesting, because why not the offensive coordinator? Maybe the head coach is the offensive coordinator, and I just don't know that. But I digress. Hopefully this is helpful for Cam Ward. There are still people that are really excited for Cam Ward. I'm not sure if he is a guy that we should be trying to sell right now, or if we should be waiting for maybe a big game. But it has a lot of Bryce Young vibes, in my opinion. But the difference is Cam Ward can see over his offensive line, and Bryce Young really can't. So I think that Cam Ward has more opportunities at hand, and hopefully he'll grow into the quarterback position, maybe a little bit more than Bryce Young. Bryce Young taking many years to develop in the league. But going back to Alec Ayomanor, 6'2", 206-pound Alec Ayomanor, 22 years old, Denver Broncos, first game as a rookie. He's only scoring you 3.3 points. But against the LA Rams, he scored 15.6 points, and Indianapolis Colts 13.8 points. To see a rookie wide receiver provide double-digit points this early in the season, I think is really encouraging. So he had a wide receiver 24 and a wide receiver 27 output in weeks 2 and 3. He's getting peppered with targets. Even week 1 against the Broncos, you know how many targets he had? He had 7 targets. Seven targets for any wide receiver you're going to want, at least on your bench, if not in your active roster. The unfortunate thing was, against the Denver Broncos is one of the best defenses in the NFL right now, and he had 2 receptions for only 13 yards, and that's why I only gave you the 3.3 fantasy points. But the Rams, he got 6 targets. He got 5 targets against the Indianapolis Colts in a very close game. And then he's got a little bit of green on the screen here. He's got Houston, at Arizona, at the Vegas, and at home with the Titans against the Patriots in week 7. And so he's got the next 4 games, opportunity. And so wide receiver, hopefully now with the new offensive scheme, it'll provide even more fantasy value for not just Cam Ward, but Alec Ayomanor. And so this is a guy that I'd be targeting. And if you could send a trade, there's a lot of people that were getting Ayomanor in late 3rd round, 4th round before the NFL draft. Sometimes he was going undrafted in rookie drafts. In the No Guts, No Glory League, I ended up getting him at 210 pre-draft, thinking this guy, he's a dude, only to find that he was drafted in the 4th round to the Titans. And I'm like, ugh, draft capital be danged. I was still fine, not as happy spending a late 2nd pick for Alec Ayomanor, but to see him get drafted with the Titans and have some opportunity ahead of him, with only Calvin Ridley ahead of him, it's like, okay, opportunity knocks, but my expectations were low. I'm like, okay, maybe late season. No, now, week 2, week 3, scoring you double-digit points. It's like, okay, we're seeing some stuff. He's starting to check off some of the boxes that we've been looking for, and he's a guy that, if you really have conviction like myself for Alec Ayomanor, I would not feel sad, throwing what could be a late 2nd or a mid-2nd for Alec Ayomanor. If you're thinking that it's going to be an early 2nd, I think I would maybe hold. Maybe you could send 2/3 for Alec Ayomanor. But because of the output that he's put in for week 2 and week 3, I'm not sure that gets it done. but it's going to be just dependent in your fantasy leagues. Is the team that has them, are they win now? Can you throw an older player to them and see what happens? Or are they a team that's, my team's growing for the future? That's where that second might come in handy. And maybe you can take him off the roster and see if you can hold on to him a little bit longer. Finally, with the 49ers, it seems like their whole season has been injuries. There's been so many injuries. Ayuk doesn't sound like he's close with returning back. Juwan Jennings hasn't practiced in a couple weeks. He's not looking good. Purdy's had a high ankle sprain. And Kittle, he has a moderate hamstring tear, and he's on IR. And, IR is usually for 4 weeks, and it sounds like Kittle might be out closer to 6 or 7 weeks. And the only guy that seems to be healthy right now is Christian McCaffrey. And so the 49ers are leaning hard on Christian McCaffrey. And they have Mac Jones under center, and Mac Jones has been playing pretty well overall. I think I also saw Pearsall, I think, is injured too. So all of the receivers seem like they're all banged up. They ended up bringing in Kendrick Bourne, and now he's on the starting roster. And so Kendrick Bourne is a guy to at least watch if you're desperate. If you're desperate, you could pick up Kendrick Bourne and maybe put him in a flex spot. But you're playing a dangerous game. He's a guy that's either going to score you a goose egg or maybe he can give you double-digit points. But Kendrick Bourne, he was injured, and he did get kicked off of the Patriots just this season. And so I don't like usually leaning on guys that have been on multiple teams in 1 year. Kendrick Bourne, he's just a guy, but he has been an athletic guy. And the 49ers, they are desperate for any sort of talent to kind of step up right now in order to continue to compete. The 49ers, they are a team that is 3-0. And so with all these injuries, what do you do if you're the 49ers? I'll probably put a poll on Twitter and like, what do you do? What are you going to do? Leave a comment at FF Healers. I'd love to know what would be, if you were the owner, if you were running the 49ers, like, what do you do as an organization? Like, are you trying to move a guy like Christian McCaffrey? Are you trying to move any of these players right now? Because right now you have the record for your division, but the players just aren't there. They're not alive right now. Or are you making moves to try and pick up more players? Do you think you're the team like, hey, we've just been snake bit? Like, and is this the team that's going to go out and get some of these receivers like Calvin Ridley from a Titans team that it really doesn't need Calvin anymore because they're starting to see some of the younger talent like Aomanor pop up, and now they can move on from a guy like Calvin Ridley to kind of fill a gap, fill a need for the 49ers offense. Just it's interesting. I think if you have the 3-0 record, in my opinion, maybe you can get a cheap guy like Calvin Ridley. I mean, what would it take? What would it take for the 49ers to trade for Calvin Ridley from the Titans? Fifth round pick. He's aging asset. I think he's only on like a 2-year contract with the Titans. I think it's a pretty low contract for the Titans. Yikes, take that back. His contract was 4 years, $92 million contract with the Tennessee Titans. They do have an out in 2026 for the 2 years with like a $16 million dead cap. And so if a team like the 49ers is gonna pick up a guy like Ridley, they'd probably have to pay like 4th or 5th round pick, maybe a 5th and a 6th round pick, something like that. And then see if the Titans can just eat the cap for this year. And then they could decide whether he's just like a 1-year rental and potentially cut Calvin Ridley after the season's over as their guys are starting to get healthy. But it'd be an interesting move. And usually we find that trades happening from an AFC team to an NFC team or an NFC team to an AFC team generally go through a little bit more easily because now they're not a player that they're going to have to really worry about. But we are getting closer and closer to the trade deadline. The trade deadline is around week 9. I think it's the day after week 9 games go on. And last year and the year before, we started to see some of these big trades happening right around 3 to 4 weeks prior to the actual deadline. We didn't really see much action on the deadline, but a lot of these deals were happening about 3-4 weeks beforehand. And that takes us to about week 5. And guess what, folks? We're in week 4 of the NFL season. I hope this was a good recap for you. I hope you got some good information about some of these players, some of these teams. There's a lot of things that are happening, a lot of changes, a lot of injuries. If you have space on your roster, don't hesitate to put your players on your taxi squads. Don't hesitate to put your players on the IR. See if it opens up a spot on your bench. With that spot on your bench, are you able to go to the waivers and pick up a second string, a third string, a fourth string running back that may or may not give you some fantasy value? Maybe there's a wide receiver or a player that you have had interested on that you've kind of starred and you're like, oh, I think I'm really interested in this guy. He's still on the waivers. Haven't heard anything. Things change very quickly in the NFL. And this is the time frame. Like, you should be stacking and saving some of these like third, fourth running backs on rosters, because all of a sudden you look up and you're like, whoa, Najee Harris is out for the season. And then it's like, whoa, well, now what used to be Haskins as the number 3 is now the number 2. And the Vidal, who was on the taxi squad, was now the number 3. And there's just a trickle effect. And these players can churn and change very quickly. That's why I picked up Bam Knight just this past week. He's probably going back to the waivers, but guess what? I'm going to be kind of listening in as my IRs kind of fill back up again. Maybe a guy like Bam Knight, or maybe another running back on some of these teams that have question marks at. Those are the players that I'm picking up, because running backs accumulate value very quickly. We found that running backs, generally, it doesn't matter like how good they are, but if they have the opportunities, they're going to be thrown into the game. And the more touches they have, the more chances for fantasy value to increase. And I believe that's why people are getting on the hype train with Chris Rodriguez, because he had 10 to 11 touches. Now, granted, they were low-calorie touches. It was only 39 yards this past week, but he was getting the touches. But I'm still aiming more for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And, yes, I'm a little more biased because I was on the Krosky-Merritt train well before any of these other guys were. So if you like finding and searching under the rocks and grinding, you're going to continue to enjoy this podcast. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please please subscribe, share with your friends. You can find me at FF Healers on Twitter X. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Again, subscribe. We're happy to have you. And if you have anyone that you want us to talk about as far as players, teams, roster construction, fantasy strategy, please hit us up. Thank you, and enjoy week 4.